David Rowan.
And it's very nice to be here. I am not a futurist. I go around the world meeting the entrepreneurs building that future, the people struggling with very high risk. Most of these startups won't work, but the ones that do could disrupt a large bit of an existing industry sector. I meet a lot of the venture capitalists who are putting quite big checks behind these companies. In the last couple of days, I've been in India. On Wednesday, I was in Hungary. So what I'm going to do is share initially some of the trends I'm seeing and why I think you're in a very exciting moment of two worlds colliding. The sensor-connected world colliding with, I guess, the storytelling tools of audiovisual, and why I think that's a big moment of potential growth for a lot of people's businesses here. And after I've briefly gone through some of the crazy stuff I'm seeing, we have an excellent group of people here. Mark, Bernd, Jonathan, Toni, and Kevin, and we're going to have an intense discussion, and because it's an interactive world, we're going to involve you. But first, the brief I was given was how sensors are bringing both the audiovisual and, I guess, tech world together. And I thought about it, and I thought, what is the most exciting thing that's happening at the moment in the accelerating pace of technology that's going to affect the AV world? And I thought, drones. And I just want to show you what's surprising me the whole time about drones. This is a Chinese startup called eHang that exhibited a drone that can carry a human being just 2 weeks ago at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. And so this is kind of disrupting my idea of what drone technology is. Again, Amazon, this is not the future. They're doing this now. Drones taking physical goods to difficult-to-reach places. Well, just think what's happening with filmmaking. So you can go to a YouTube channel. This is a gentleman called Alex Chacon. He sends his drone around the world with him, photographing him wherever he is. He's got a lot of viewers. It's going to be pretty hard, I think, to be the girlfriend of Alex Chacon, because he's not going to be looking at you the whole time. He's going to be looking at that thing up there. But everywhere we look, you know, the company I saw in China, DJI, well, it's not really a drone company, although it's the biggest consumer drone company in the world. It's effectively an audiovisual company. It creates this amazing technology inside very, very small, powerful 4K and up cameras. Is there volume on this, by the way? Do we have some sound? Wow! This is just one example of the hardware that DJI, this company in Shenzhen, puts out. I mean, they talk about what they're disrupting, the whole filmmaking world they're disrupting, with a little tiny camera called the Osmo that's on a gimbal, which means you don't have to hold it straight. You can be shaking, but the picture is straight. And it's a consumer-level, professional technology. This is one of the reasons GoPro's share price has been tumbling.
Presenting the DJI Osmo.
So all this is giving us, I guess, a connected world where everything is online. There's no offline anymore. We've got video clips coming from every dash cam. We've got sensors falling in price, being ubiquitous. In a couple of years, there'll be a sensor on your chair to tell the RAI which seats are free, what the temperature is, how excited people are they bored with David's talk, whatever. And that, again, we're on a Moore's law curve. That is just at the very beginning. That's at the homebrew computer club moment where this guy called Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs met and started hacking around with computers. So at the same time, robotics and artificial intelligence are also very quickly transforming the reality. So this is a gentleman in a self-driving car for the first time. It's weird, but this is the future, and it's coming more quickly than we think because it's going to save lives. Insurance companies are going to mandate this. Health services are going to expect it. And this is Tesla's car, and they downloaded the software overnight to create an autonomous car. Just think of what used to be military-grade robotics that's now being consumerized. This is the company that Google bought called Boston Dynamics. They like kicking their robot dogs. No robot dog was harmed in the making of this. But this is incredibly sophisticated, and it's being consumerized in real time. We did a little project at Wired about a little robot that you sit in your kitchen. It's copied the movements of chefs, so it can be your Michelin-starred chef in your very own kitchen. This is Tesla's motor car factory. This is where they make cars. Not many humans involved. It's a rather beautiful ballet.
You have to travel far into the Australian outback to look into the future. Here in the dust and intense heat, they're digging for iron ore. These trucks work 23 hours a day. Each load is almost 300 tons. But look closely, there's no one behind the wheel.
This is hitting every industry sector, and it's happening now. And you can't really ignore it. There's even robots being designed as your receptionist at your office. This is a project from Singapore.
I am a social companion. I can speak of emotions and I can recognize people. I recognize you, Nadia. Nice to meet you again today.
I don't think you're ready to give up your PA just yet, are you? But you know, at some stage soon it will become credible. So I mentioned this exponential curve, which is that Moore's law idea that processing power keeps doubling every 18 months, 2 years. It's still happening. It's not reached the limits of physics, and it's going to hit the AV world in all sorts of interesting ways. Already computing is becoming essentially free. This is the Raspberry Pi computer that cost about $5, designed by some academics in Cambridge. In fact, it's so cheap that it was given away on the cover of a magazine. So we've kind of reversed the norm now. You give away the computer with the paper thing. Think of what Moore's law is doing to imaging in a medical context. This is a company called EchoPixel. It's amazing. Wouldn't have been possible 3 years ago. This gentleman on the International Space Station recently needed a new wrench, so it was emailed to him as an attachment and then printed in the 3D printer inside the space station. So just 3D printing as one example, one of these fast emerging technologies. I thought I knew what 3D printing was. I keep, again, getting surprised. This is a company that allows you to 3D print circuitry into whatever it is you're making. This is in China, where they're 3D printing houses. They printed 18 houses in 24 hours. I don't think I'd like to live there. And again, the norms are changing. This is a project that was launched last March, an entirely new technique for 3D printing. This is in real time printing the Eiffel Tower out of the blue goo, which is actually 100 times quicker than the existing conventional way of 3D printing. So I now suddenly think all that stuff I thought I knew, well, it's irrelevant. It's all changed. So we're in a world where screens are ubiquitous, and that is going to change behavior in all sorts of ways. And it's going to change the way that people expect to receive audiovisual content. And we still haven't quite worked out what's going to work and what's not going to work. But what we do know is that's where engagement is. And you have to be wherever the people are. This is a slide from Mary Meeker of Kleiner Perkins on the amount of hours Americans spend on their digital screens every day. So this is from 2008 to last year. The green is their mobile, the blue is their laptop or their desktop, the yellow is anything else. But what's really interesting is we've moved from spending 2.7 hours a day, doubled that to 5.6 hours a day looking into one of these screens. So this is engagement. You're not giving your colleagues, your children, you're not walking to a meeting, you're on that device. And then we still have to work out what that means for the way signage works, for the way people consume content at home. So sensors everywhere, self-driving cars as the norm, physical devices in our home, your smart thermostat, the Nest is just at the very beginning, sending data back to the network, having algorithms that understand your behavior, that customize the experience for you. This is how much Google bought Nest for, the thermostat company, 2 years ago. So what happens to the people consuming audiovisual content in a world of ubiquitous connectivity, of sensors sending data back? In a world where a group of amateurs in a startup in Munich can create these new in-ear headphones, it's called the Bragi, started being distributed last week, that's got a whole bunch of very cheap sensors in them, because the smartphone revolution has made them cheap. But also, inside your ear, it's got an infrared which they say looks at your capillaries and can tell you your heartbeat, your blood oxygen level, your heart rate variability, all these things that used to require huge medical devices. What happens in a world where every physical thing, if it's not networked, it becomes irrelevant? So we are going to need, the smart basketball that's connected to the network. We did a project at Wired about what happens in the physical world when everything is networked. The taxi gets automatic directions based on your online schedule. The sandwich shop knows you're coming near, knows who you are, starts to make your chicken sandwich before you get there. Probably more important, the smartphone warns you of an ex-girlfriend or boyfriend ahead so you can cross the street and get out of the way. So it's starting to appear in signage. This company, BlipTrack, uses the speed at which people's phones are being tracked as they go through an airport to give you a much more accurate idea of how long you're going to have to wait. So this is the sensor merging with the display of information. It changes your customer's relationship with you. Mark Benioff, founder of Salesforce, I was with in November, and he was explaining that he always traveled with one of these Philips Sonicare toothbrushes. He had one in his pocket then. He said, but I keep losing them. So I must have bought 100 of these, but my relationship is with Costco where I buy them. Philips doesn't know who I am, except they're now starting to put sensors in. So for the first time, the manufacturer has that direct relationship with me. They know who I am, my behavior. They can sell extra services to me. This is going to hit all sorts of other sectors. It's a very new thing in terms of knowing who your customer is in real time and what they're doing. We're putting sensors into devices to track children. The Internet of Children is here. This ankle band, it's called the Sproutling. You can monitor your baby through your smartphone. In the UK, this is what we do to a convicted criminal, but apparently now this is responsible parenting. So I hear a lot about the Internet of Things and how it's going to be transformative, and generally it is. But sometimes people don't really think through the use cases. It's what I call the Internet of Stupid Things. Just because the sensors are cheap and anybody can basically create devices with them now, it doesn't mean you always should. There's a company that went bust recently called Quirky, which put sensors in things like this milk jar. It's called the Milkmaid, and it's got sensors that tell you when your milk has started to go sour, and it will send you an urgent notification. So presumably you cancel your meetings in the afternoon and dash back home to change your milk. If you're obsessed with the freshness of your eggs, they also made the $50 smart egg tray, the egg minder, which has push notifications to alert you when you're running low and that kind of stuff. This is what I call the Internet of Stupid Things. It makes me think just because the tools are there doesn't mean people should be allowed to use them. Just because this Chinese hairdresser got access to a free online translation tool to try and translate its name into English doesn't mean they should have been allowed to use that free translation tool. So what does this mean for the AV world? Well, Minority Report was pretty good at predicting it. Tracking people, customizing displays, knowing who they are. And I know a company called Oblong is displaying here that did a lot of the early work on this film. It's more than a decade old. So this might not be the exact way people will interact with the AV system, but we're getting closer to the system, not needing one of these because it responds to you, it knows who you are. And then this comes along. This is going to be the big thing of this year, the virtual reality headset. Who here has tried one of these Oculus Rift or similar headsets? So about 85% of you have this experience to look forward to. It is really transformative. It's a game changer. Facebook owns a company, Samsung, there's a whole bunch of companies, HTC, they're releasing products this year. It's going to change the expectation of the consumer. If you're a travel company, you are going to have to give that immersive VR experience of the hotel and the beach. If you're a real estate broker, you're going to have to take people inside the apartment that hasn't yet been built. This is an example of what happens when people try this for the first time.
I'm going on a roller coaster, I'll throw up.
You put me on a damn roller coaster.
I happen to love roller coasters. Oh, no. I really am scared of heights.
This is higher than the cyclone.
No.
Oh, God.
It's not real.
My stomach, though. doesn't know that.
And this feels like you're actually on a roller coaster.
My goodness.
I have a suspicion we're going to have a fast descent.
Okay.
I'll spoil you. I won't give you the fast descent. This is where the money's going. This is a company called Magic Leap that's doing some kind of display technology. They haven't said very much about it, but we do know that last week they raised another $800 million to add to the $500 million that they've already raised. And all we know is they've put these slightly strange video teasers online. So what do you spend like $1.3 billion on? Is it miniature flying elephants? Who knows? In fact, it's called Magic Leap, the company. This is apparently a real-time demo they also put online. You don't even need a screen. Whatever it is they've got, we can interact with like a hologram in whole new ways. And that is going to hit the market sometime, I guess, within the next year. And then you get silly things. At the Wired conference, we had an exercise machine connected to your virtual reality headset. It's fun if you're on there. If you're watching someone on there, boy, do you laugh at them. So we're at the beginning. And the network is starting to know how you feel, because there are technologies like this. This is a company called Affectiva that monitors your facial expression to know real-time your emotion. TV companies, advertising companies are using this to optimize trailers.
What if your devices could read your emotions and respond to them? Emotion is developing technology to do just that. Our industry-leading emotion-aware system will enable a revolution in device and application personalization. We're taking more pictures and videos than ever before. Imagine organizing this content by emotion, so your most memorable moments are easier to find.
Apple just bought that company, by the way. Although my favorite example of face recognition technology so far is this company called Churchix, which sells its service to American churches so the vicar can know who pretended they were in the congregation that Sunday but wasn't actually there, which I think is genius. And lastly, artificial intelligence is going to come along and change how we interact with the screen in interesting ways. This is Demis Hassabis, a London entrepreneur, behind a company called DeepMind. And DeepMind is trying to solve the big AI problem, general artificial intelligence, not just recognizing pictures, translating words. This is give it any stimulus, see if it can think like a human being. And that's a very ambitious thing. That will take like 20, 30 years. So he hasn't got any revenue. They don't have any products on the market. When I went to see Demis, he was very excited, though. They finally taught the machine how to play Space Invaders just by giving it the pixels, just telling it, try and get the highest score. He said the first hour it kept getting killed. An hour later, it starts to recognize patterns. They left it on all night. By the morning, it was the world's best ever Space Invader player. They had a cover story in Nature. Last week, they even beat the European champion at this obscure game called Go. But this is an AI. So this company that has no revenue and no product was also bought by Google. This is for £400 million, which is almost real money.
Mr. Theodore Twombly, welcome to the world's first artificially intelligent
This is the movie Her.
We'd like to ask you a few questions.
Okay.
Are you social or antisocial?
I guess I haven't been social in a while.
How would you describe your relationship with your mother? Thank you. Please wait as your operating system is initiated.
Hello, I'm here.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Samantha.
So he falls in love with the operating system. Unfortunately, she's got 8,000 other boyfriends in the network. It doesn't end happily. But I wonder if this is the way we're going to interact with our devices. And at the same time, simulation using display screens is moving forward. This is a London company called Improbable, where I'm a bit involved. They've raised quite large sums of money to build real-time simulation engines that you can use to simulate a whole city, to simulate a real world in a game in a much more realistic way. And again, we're just at the beginning of something that's going to be very exciting. So if you think AV is going to be what it was last year, it's all going to change very quickly. And just think, sensors plus data, solving problems like the one I've just had, getting on an aeroplane at a scheduled time. This is GE working with Accenture to try and make plane timings, schedulings so much more reliable, because the economy will benefit, passengers' convenience will benefit. This is what I think of as big data. It's solving real problems. And there's a but, and I think we'll talk a bit about the but, which is once you network everything, there is vulnerability. This is the €5,000 smart toilet, which I'm sure many of you aspire to own. It's got its own app that you can use to flush, deodorize. There was a security consultant about a year and a half ago who released a very serious, worried report warning that the smartest toilet could be hacked. If you had enemies, they could breach your toilet from anywhere in the world and set it deodorizing all night, and there was nothing you could do. And I tell you this not because I think you need to be an expert on the hackable toilet, just to make you aware of everywhere we connect the network, there will be breaches. And you can go online and pay freelance people to bring down your competitor's website, or put up a botnet, or you can hack a girl's webcam for $1. You can hack a boy's webcam for a penny, which I think is a bit unfair. But this vulnerability, I think this is where AV and IT are going to have an interesting discussion as well. Because we are still at that exponential growth curve. In California, they talk about when you go in an analog era like the last century, 30 paces, you're 30 feet away. But when you're doubling at each step, suddenly you're in a whole new world. Changes the reality before you know it. Something that was expensive becomes free. If in 1994 I'd have said to you, let's start a business giving away storage, we'll be really rich, we'll call it Dropbox, it would have made no sense. But suddenly, at the right moment, it makes sense. And this curve is hitting not just IT, it's hitting the falling cost of sequencing DNA. It's hitting the speed at which a company comes from nowhere and becomes $1 billion company. And it's hitting the speed at which consumers adopt these new technologies. So I'm going to leave you with one thought. Some new technology will come along and challenge what you think is your sales cycle, what you think is your customer's expectation. This came out in 2007. There was the head of another big company that made smartphones when Apple launched the iPhone, who was asked on television what he thought. Did he see the iPhone as a threat? And this is what he said.
$500 fully subsidized with a plan? I said, that is the most expensive phone in the world, and it doesn't appeal to business customers because it doesn't have a keyboard, which makes it not a very good email machine.
How did that work out, Steve Ballmer of Microsoft? Thank you for listening to me. But now the important stuff, the panel. So we're going to have our experts giving us a little 5-minute introduction, telling us a bit about themselves. Have you agreed among yourself who's going to be first, or you're going to leave me to impose that? They're very shy. We'll wake them up. I'm going to start then with Mark Grady, who is Channel Sales Lead for Europe, Middle East and Africa for Google's Android. Does all sorts of things with Chrome. Used to be with Virgin, Orange and Microsoft. Now he can get you Chromebox set up for your conferences. He insists he pays his full tax allowance, but he's going to tell us now a little bit about where he, with the Google viewpoint, sees the opportunities ahead.
Good evening, and thank you. The first thing to say really today, I'm here to talk about two parts of the Google Chrome platform, so primarily video conferencing and digital signage. And I think it's very interesting to look at how we see consumerization today and how that is actually having an impact into businesses. And where this is really interesting, I think, is that we're seeing today a generation entering the workforce who've grown up using consumer video calling. They're used to it, they're comfortable with it, and then they arrive at work and are told you've got to use an audio conferencing bridge with a 9-digit PIN code. And it's not really resonating with them. Some are just actually deciding they'll still continue to use that consumer technology. And I think what's very, very interesting with that is that today we see, predominantly on the video conferencing area, a lot of it, it started with multinational businesses using it, but now it's actually small businesses who see a requirement for it, mid-market businesses. And in turn, they want to have products that are at a price point that makes sense for them. And I think today, you'll see we've done that with our video conferencing product called Chromebox for Meetings, which is launched across Europe. And I think we will see more adoption of that across all forms of technology. As they become cheaper, you will see the consumerization meet the business. And separately on digital signage, really, I think another great case for us that today you see businesses, they have content, they've developed a website, they've developed traditional signs, and they actually want to have digital signs that can respond to the changes in their business, whether it's a flower shop that has Valentine's Day coming up at the end of this week, right through to Christmas. So I think there you're going to see another example. I've developed a website in HTML5 content. Can I go and buy a Chrome bit for £90 and plug that in with an HDMI into a screen and start using digital screens? So all in all, I think for me, the Chrome platform and where Google sees this, particularly in the workspace, is around really speed, simplicity, security, and flexibility with Chrome. And I'm really looking forward to hearing some questions today, and also the other thoughts of panelists here as well. Thank you.
And Bernd Eberhardt, you are, I guess, our display hardware projection expert, president and CEO of NEC Display Solutions. You've been there since 1993.
Yes.
You've seen a few revolutions in the last few years, I think. So you understand display products, projection tools more than most. Tell us what you're seeing.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Mark. Also, thank you for the good presentation you have made, and you have seen a lot of nice displays in your videos. So therefore, from NEC point of view, we are looking, let me say, very much forward to the future. And NEC is, let me say, we have a very broad display technology. We are very technology agnostic, and whatever comes, let me say, on the market, on core technology, we try to make a display. And it's very, let me say, challenging. What is a display? Is it only an LCD monitor, or is it an LED screen, or is it a projector, or is it something completely new? What we have seen also in your video, what will come, let me say, to the world again. So many things are, let me say, in progress. We are seeing, let me say, a lot of new technologies coming. So in our company, we are using a new slogan, the three L's, so LCD, LED, and laser. And we have a very good, let me say, experience and background to develop the right product for that. From NEC, we are, let me say, talking also and cooperating with a lot of companies, and we are cooperating also with the people here on stage. And we are trying to exchange, let me say, display technology like with Google or with Intel. So we are working on a lot of software developments as well to make data exchange easier. We are working also as NEC on a sensor technology middleware since years. This was really a project started several years ago, what we did together with the European Union on interactivity and exchange of data to displays. And we are doing also face recognition and all these things. So it's theoretically everything is working and possible.
But Bernd, when you see some of these new display technologies that don't actually need a screen, they're holograms, they're projected in front of you, they're virtual reality lenses, do you see that as a big threat or a potential opportunity?
Both, let me say. It's a threat from technology point of view, but it's also an opportunity, let me say, in that way.
Now, Toni Barnett is MD at CDEC, which is a £13 million business. There's about 50 engineers and 40 other people selling their services, particularly focusing on technology and education. So you must have seen a few changes because there's been a whole democratization there. Tell us, Toni, what you're noticing.
Good evening and thank you. I'm Toni Barnett, Managing Director of CDEC Limited. CDEC is one of the leading AV reseller integrators in the UK. We design and implement bespoke AV solutions to suit our customer needs. We're a multi-award winning firm and are leaders in our field. Our solutions range from projectors to touchscreen systems through to digital signage, meeting and conference fit-outs, lecture theatre, LED and so on.
Let me just ask you, when you're working in something like education, what is the growing demand that you're seeing? How do people want to use AV in new ways?
They want it to be seamless. They don't necessarily want to be stuck at the front of the class. They want to be able to come in, connect and go. It's all got to be seamless. It's got to be easy. It's really always been the same, but now it's about a device that's touchscreen and it's being able to remotely connect to it.
Okay. Jonathan Wagstaff is a man who likes data. He collects tons of it all the time. Every time somebody buys something, every time a price changes across the whole of the supply chain. You ask him what the price in Lithuania half an hour ago of a component was. Can you tell us?
I'd probably say we take Amex and then I give you the answer.
Okay. But you've previously worked with Accenture, so you know the challenge that a lot of big companies have been going through to try and adapt to this new world. From the context of context, which you represent, what are you seeing?
As you say, we collect a huge amount of data. I think the last time I checked, it was 1.2 billion euros a week going through the Western European database. And we're looking at the sales at every point in the supply chain. So vendor sell-in, distribution, corporate resale, retail. So we're tracking it at every level. The big trends that we're seeing, I'm quite pleased to say it's all good news for both a networking that supports these display systems, AV systems, and the displays themselves. I've tried to memorize as much useful, salient data as I could for tonight. Things that stand out, professional displays, we saw about a 15% year-on-year increase in revenue going through Western Europe in Q4. It's been a pretty good success story, really, for professional displays. Interactive displays, huge year-on-year growth in Q4. I think it's about over 100% year-on-year growth. But that's not to say that the other more traditional forms of AV equipment are losing out. So we saw growth for pretty much everything, including projectors, big growth for interactive whiteboards. But the real star performer, I said, was the interactive displays. So that's what we've been seeing through distribution.
And the clients you're working with, are they starting to think about what happens when the screen is going to know how we're feeling? What happens when the screen might be something we wear on our eyes? Or to them, is this just something ahead?
The whole virtual reality thing is a big part of what I've been looking into recently. I was out seeing the team from Exertis in the UK recently, talking to them just about this exact topic. My perception, the perception of the company, is that this is not going to be the year that virtual reality snowballs. We're not going to see a virtual reality headset in everyone's living room.
Because they'll start off expensive.
Exactly. Well, this is it. And I think for those of you who were at CES this year, Oculus, who we talked about earlier, they said that the price point of this is $600. I think it's £500, 550 euros, something like that, for the first retail version you can buy online. And when they were asked, why is this technology priced at $600? This is very expensive for most consumers. They said, well, the thing is, we want the first generation of technology to excite people. We want it to be like any other first generation technology, like the first DVD players were expensive. I mean, Laserdisc players, those kind of technology, I think when they first came out were very, very expensive. And actually what Oculus have said is that for $600, you get a lot for your money. They're saying, actually, this is a lot of kit. I mean, what I would say, there's kind of another layer there that Oculus have not perhaps been so loud about, for particularly the consumers, which is the technology you need to support a virtual reality headset. So I'm a bit of a gamer. It amazes me I have a girlfriend sometimes. And I've built a PC to cope with the Oculus when it comes out on the 31st of March. But it's a very high-spec machine. So it's not just the investment that you're having to put in for the headsets, it's also the investment you have to put in for the technology that supports it. And one other thing related to what's going to happen in terms of the display, because we're having 2 displays instead of sort of one, and the extra processing power needed, the resolutions are going to suffer. So actually, although 4K gaming monitors are a big thing right now, we're seeing a big growth going through distribution, actually the fidelity of the picture is going to suffer for these headsets. So this is not going to be the year of Snowball, but it is definitely going to be the year of...
But it'll be good enough to hack your perception. And the other thing that's changing is, when I was in India, I saw $30 smartphones. So that Moore's Law curve will kick in, and I guess there'll be a $50 virtual reality headset in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, that's it. And I think companies like Oculus don't want people to first generation technology to underwhelm them.
Okay.
They want it to make, well, perhaps not make people sick like that. I've tried the Helter Skelter, and it is, I think that is another concern, that they don't want to scare people as well, this technology.
The very patient Kevin Morrison from Harman, responsible for Harman's professional division, some pretty high-end products you're working with. From the Harman side of the world, what does this room need to understand?
Oh, I think, well, let me introduce Harman a little bit, if I could. Harman today is about a $6.5 billion company, and their technology is across automotive industry, basically the Pro AV in the service I work for here, and also the lifestyle business in audio. So we believe that the connected car, the connected home, and the connected enterprise is with us. We actually demonstrated at CES recently about taking an audio and a video call, taking it from the car to the office to the home. So, but we think it's pretty imminent. I represent the professional division of Harman, which is about $1.2 billion of audio, video, control and automation and lighting. So we see a dramatic shift here using sensor technologies and many other technologies in our standard AV business. My side is the enterprise business, which covers corporate, education, government, large venues for transport, large venues for stadiums, and the hospitality market, which is gaming, pubs, clubs, and leisure. So it's quite a significant market space. We recently changed from what really was an old AV transactional-based company to a very solution-centric organization. We are now building audio, video, and lighting and automation solutions, very much an immersive experience for the customer base. And as I say, our customers are the who's who in the government, investment banking centers, casinos, theme parks, and stadiums, all now using some form of sensor technology in that immersive experience.
So how big is your hardcore tech team, the engineers who are building this future?
About 26,000 engineers around the globe.
That's
so
some
it's
tech
pretty
team.
Significant. Yeah, the automotive piece is actually leading. Probably at some point, most people in this room have probably been in a Harman experience, probably might not realizing that they've actually been in there. The whole panel in front of the car today, the telemetry, the entertainment, and everything is probably a Harman product in your vehicle.
So when you see this convergence happening between pictures and sound and hardcore networking technology, does that excite you about this huge growth opportunity?
I think it's a fantastic growth opportunity, yes. And I do believe people ask us commonly, what about convergence? I mean, it's here. We live it every day.
So we've got people who are on the front line of this transition. Has somebody here worked on a project recently that seemed to be an AV project, but really was a hardcore tech project? I'm quite keen to see what kind of thinking goes through this and what kind of lessons you learn. So who here is going to share an experience?
I can perhaps throw out one. We're a client that we actually have in central London. have wanted, the CEO in particular wanted to drive a LEED building. He wanted it to be smart, he wanted it to be green, and we learned in our experience that you cannot do that later. You've got to do it up front with the architects, the planners, the AV people, the electrical, MEP guys, whatever you want to call them. You've got to do it very early in the design phase. Today, this customer can, with their smart card, go up to any floor, select the desk, select facilities that they need, all the way down to a coffee machine. They can basically do daylight harvesting throughout the building. They actually have, the rooms are dark until they're lit up. They've got occupancy centers and measure utilization and occupancy within the room. They actually collaborate with all the type of collaboration tools. You'll see it this show, not particularly from Harman, but for anybody. But that we believe is the future of buildings today. There is no question that they have saved millions of dollars, or millions of pounds, should I say, as part of their fit out. It's an excellent reference point for anybody who'd like to see it. But we believe that's the future of building. It's a lot of sensor technology and everything else being used in the day.
If the building is increasingly going to be smart and going to have embedded screens, embedded speakers, isn't the customer going to be concerned that it will be redundant in 2 or 3 years? How if you're designing an educational space? How if you're designing maybe a retail space? Do you persuade the client that spending money now is not going to be wasted money in 3 years when some new technology comes along?
We have a similar experience from Harman. So we worked on an international project with a Japanese retailer, fashion retailer, and he rolled out his signage concept. There was a controlled and, let me say, not only controlled, also the content is everything is coming from Japan, and they want to roll it out, in all the stores around the globe. And they went out and gave it to an IT integrator because they thought, okay, fine, we have to do the content management. They're doing also the cashier or the cash management from Japan. So, and then the signage can be done from the same IT companies. That was really theoretically possible. Practically, when you do this around 50 countries in the world, you come really to the nitty-gritty things where you need AV knowledge to install displays at the right place, to install projectors at the right time. LED, let me say, you need to understand what is allowed, what is not allowed in a country, in a city, and all these things. So it's, when you ask me convergence, where they are, they need to work together, and they need to work hand in hand, especially on global projects. That is the experience what we have in
So
NEC.
we're in an era of collaboration, but surely the demand for content streamed, shared, conferencing, it's going to put massive demands on existing bandwidth capabilities. I mean, Mark, I know Google seems to cope with rather a lot of demands on its service, and you've got probably millions of servers around the world, but how should the CIO of a company that's starting to invest in new kind of signage, new kind of interactive displays, how should they think about the infrastructure that needs to support it, the provision of that bandwidth?
It's a good question, and I think particularly if you take a look at it, so I'll separate it in two parts. The first one is, say, around video conferencing. It's about being transparent and simple on what you think you're going to need, and I think we've addressed that in Chromebox for Meetings with the fact that we do have a limit on the users of 15 users who can be on a Hangout at any one time with that Chromebox for Meetings, and therefore, you can say to a CIO, you will need about 4 megabytes. You will need an Ethernet to connect that. And I think we have to keep it very, very simple about that. And in some cases, that message isn't always what people want to hear, because you may think, well, I need more connectivity. But actually, I think it's about being very defined in the needs for the user. And likewise with signage, the same thing. but you do have to work closely and make sure that the reporting is available, how much it's going to be used. All those statistics are available, and we work on that very hard to have those statistics come out of the management console that goes with the digital signage as well.
Because we expect it. We're spoiled now. We expect it just to work. We're intolerant when it doesn't.
We do, yes.
There's that great Louis C.K. clip you can get on YouTube, and he's talking about how everybody's just taking it all for granted, this amazing world we're in with technology. I was sitting next to somebody on the plane using satellite Wi-Fi, and it went down for a minute, and it was no. And I said to him, that signal just went up to space and came back so you could send that email. Don't you understand? People are going to never expect any less than they're getting now. I guess the IT manager is anxious because they know there's going to be more pressure on them to keep buying the new kit. If you were the IT manager of a fairly decent-sized company, feeling a bit of pressure on your budget, what would you prioritize?
That's a really interesting question. Again, from speaking to integrators and distributors who deal with a lot of this kit and specialize in it, there's a lot of future-proofing going on. I think there's sort of generally the perception is that particularly things like 4K content, there actually really isn't that content out there. And it just, I suppose it depends on how much you care about future-proofing, really, and how much money you had to spend. I suppose if I had a limitless budget, then I'd have everything ready for 8K, or 11K, I hear Samsung are developing now. But I suppose it would depend on budgetary constraints. I do find it quite interesting that there's a lot of future-proofing going on, actually. So I suppose it would depend on my budget would be an answer.
And then who does the IT manager collaborate with? Who's in charge? If you've got the audiovisual expertise, the specialist on creating signage or conferencing, where does power lie? Who gets the final decision? Is it the CIO? Is it a fight each time?
I think it's interesting because we see particularly with the Chrome devices, we see that maybe Chromebooks are initially deployed next to, say, Google Apps or in a VDI environment, maybe to run Citrix or VMware. And then we've had customers actually come and say to us, well, what about taking that and using it as a sign and adding that? Now, interestingly, a number of customers that we've spoken to in Europe about that have actually come back and said, I'm interested in looking after the device and managing it if it's simple, but I'm not interested in the content. HR, branding, marketing, look after that piece. And I think probably for a CIO or the IT director, maybe now they're looking at it from a point of view saying, I know where I can go and how far I can go, but actually it's up to HR to run that sign and run the content on it, and I will look after the device. So I think there's a more cooperative approach about that. And I also think that it's a healthy thing to have, because often they've in the past may have been involved more when a problem has come versus not.
Well, go ahead.
From display solution side, so we are same as Harman. We are working only in the professional business, and we have exactly the same. Let me say, focus on customers, corporate accounts, international accounts, education, and end-to-end. So from our side, whenever we are, and we have very often a direct touch to the end customer, so we are not bypassing our channel partners, so we want to understand what the customer needs is and how they want to do business and how they do business, and at the end, the real execution from NEC side we are doing always together with our channel partners. But when we are talking to the customer, and that is depending in a large corporate, when we are selling pure, let me say, displays, and the majority is in desktop displays, we are talking to the IT manager. When we are talking to conference technology, we are talking sometimes to the marketing department and sometimes to general affairs. And when it comes to large organization in retail, or let me say where they're making really branding out of it, we are talking with the marketing department.
Does that make it harder to find the person who has to sign the check?
Yeah, it's true. It's So it's very hard. And maybe Toni, she is more at the end customer side and on the day-to-day business, but she can maybe answer even much better.
Yeah, it's very much so. You've got the IT, you've got the AV side, and also for digital signage, you'll have, we worked with Pirelli tyres, and when we went to do our presentation, we had marketing, we had AV, we had IT, and we had the managing director there to make the decision, and we presented to all of them. And they all had a part to play within that purchase.
So it sounds more like the consulting model where you bring a team in
well,
and try and solve the problem.
It's certainly more of a consensus-based sale today. I mean, you've got lots of stakeholders in any large project. I would suggest that you've got facilities management people, you have AV people, you have IT people, because normally the IT guys have the keys if they've got the network. So it really is very much a consensus-based discussion and decision, really.
I noticed nobody's mentioned the security person. I mean, I, in a fairly light-hearted way, tried to open this question. How much concern do you have among the clients you're talking to about the vulnerability of these networks?
It normally sits with the IT side, doesn't it? So that's where the security side would sit. So normally, with them talking to them, you're ensuring that it's going to fit within their remit and they're happy.
We've actually got to go through the hoops with IT, because if it is going to go on the network, it's got to be highly secure.
I expect security is going to be the CEO's bag pretty soon, because
yes, well, look
everybody's being breached.
Some of the breaches that have actually, over the last 24 months have been quite considerable. I mean, even ourselves, we were a story had spun up a couple of weeks ago about us being in the White House and a couple of other places, and that span out of all control by some of the other press, not the trade press, to be fair, which was quite wrong and quite inaccurate.
You weren't hacking into Obama's emails?
No, we weren't, but he's a good user of ours. But the thing is that it was a big message to the whole of the AV market. Just make sure that you are secure, because this is very different days. The days of isolated, old sort of AV-style projects are gone. Most likely you're going to ride on the network at some point, and therefore the IT guys want to make sure you're totally secure.
So I want to bring in the wisdom of the crowd in a minute, but there's a couple of specific things I want to ask about. One of them is the nature of the conference like this, and how these fast-changing technologies you think are going to change ISE 2020. I mean, what do you see in terms of the technologies both we have at the moment, but we will have within the next 4 or 5 years? How is that likely to change the way that people get together to swap ideas, to network?
I can step in. It's been very interesting what we're seeing with the disruptors to particularly small to medium businesses for conferencing. I keep reading in AV magazine and various other publications, the conference room is dead, and we now have to refer to it as the collaboration space. So, I mean, what does that mean? What do you need for a collaboration space? Well, I suppose easy interconnectivity is probably the first thing. So you want devices you can easily connect to. But also, because your traditional radio conferencing was a very big spend, something perhaps only really available to bigger companies, it's interesting seeing like Google stepping in with products which are priced, they're not dirt cheap, but they're appealing to this sort of middle level. And it's coming from outside of the traditional manufacturers you'd expecting to have a play in that market.
Will we all be sitting on stages in 5 years, or will there be a simulacrum, a hologram, with people in the audience walking through it?
Possibly.
I think we will still sit here. Not here, but maybe not we, but others.
What about the conference, the video conference? I mean, you're thinking a lot about this, Mark. How is that going to evolve?
I think it's going to change immensely. I think today that what you see with video conferencing, we're just sort of scratching the surface today. It will become far more democratic in terms of businesses using it. It won't be a CXO conversation about using it. It will be being used at all levels. And I think particularly What I think is very, very interesting about it is actually Google's own story around that. Over 12,000 rooms in Google are being used for video conferencing today. And I think if you take that, what we see today is now, like the conversation we were having about buildings being fitted out, we're talking to a number of clients in Europe about very large deployments, if not in taking a traditional PC type of view or what's been before. These are large numbers. To see 100, 200 rooms in a business being connected up to video conferencing, it is a big change, but also how it's being used. And I always think it's interesting if you take a look at people using it for wormholes. They're leaving it on all day because they may have it be a startup with 2 engineers, and they just leave it on all day. Or a customer in the UK has one video conferencing unit actually in their canteen. So it's one is in London, and another is at their office, which is 70 miles outside London. You can go and get a coffee, wave, see somebody, and put your headset on and have a chat. So I think it's very, very exciting, the changes that can make, but also it brings people closer together in a business, that decisions are being made. We all still need that screen to see each other, learn and understand maybe how we're feeling. There's a huge difference in seeing hand gestures and everything else that comes with that.
Collaboration and interactivity is getting more demanded from the end users. Whether he has a phone, a touch phone, or a smartphone, so this has changed really the perception how to use a display. So we need to be open from our side as a display manufacturer to offer, let me say, various kinds of different touch technology, various kinds of how to interact with all different programs. So for us, it's really a challenge to make a product what can work with different, let me say, manufacturer, let me say, programs. But we are working on it. We are trying, let me say, to follow. But it's really collaboration and interactivity is a trend.
The reality of the situation, work has changed dramatically.
Yes.
People do not come and then go and sit in a conference facility anymore. They're normally at their desk or at some form of collaboration opportunity.
Or in a shared workspace.
Shared workstations, huddle space, whatever you like to call them. The agile working, activity-based working, whatever you want to call it, has just changed. It's a paradigm shift.
Yeah. What I'm hearing to conclude is a kind of nice well of optimism about the opportunities ahead. A sense from the panel that we're going to have to hug each other a lot more and work collaboratively and bring the various specialists together to make AV and IT talk to each other.
A very, very good example, because you need let me say, both technologies. You need let me say, the screen technology, you need the audio technology, and in future you need the IT technology, because and also network technology, because as of today all the content is distributed manually. So it's a question of time when it goes via satellite.
So we're going to be consuming this content in all sorts of strange things we wear in our newly smart home, which we'll have to spend a bit of money updating, which is probably good for business. We'll be still coming back to ISE 2020 and sitting on the same stools, but people will probably be tweeting, if Twitter still exists, on new kinds of devices that may go directly into the brain. The AI will drive you to work, and we just have to hope it doesn't turn evil. And going to the cinema will probably become a bit more expensive to buy tickets, but possibly a bit more fun. And we're all going to be saving up our $600 for our Oculus. And we have an expert here if you want to get a very, very high-end PC set up. Tons of information to process there. Lots of expertise. Thank you, panel, for sharing so openly. Thank you, Jonathan Wagstaff, Toni Barnett, Kevin Morrison, Bernd Eberhardt, and Mark Grady.